so you'll hear that. So we wanted to put a list together just of some ideas and things that we've seen in deals lately that we think will help everybody document when a property has solar panels from a listing agent standpoint, and also from the buyer's agent, some steps they can perform. Okay, so if you're a listing agent on a property that has solar panels, make sure that the seller has the original contract that they signed with the solar panel company, that they can provide you a copy. The terms and everything will be contained in this contract, and a lot of times these are still leased. You know, the leases can be 15, 20 years, and they may not be paid off, which leads to the next section of ask the seller to request a payoff statement. They can simply request that and get that fairly quick from the solar panel company. The payoff will be different from the financed amount, so make sure that you're ahead of the game. You have the contract that the seller signed and a copy of the most recent payoff statement. When you take this type of listing where you know there's solar panels on the property, make sure that you're advising in the agent remarks on the MLS that there are solar panels on the property and that there's a solar panel contract, so that the other agents are alerted to that to be ready to explain to their buyer. And you also want to have that preliminary title report. I always recommend you order that ASAP because in this case, a lot of times these solars are going to be listed as a lien on the title report. So you want to go ahead and check that and see where it's at and how much it's showing leaned on your title report, just so you're aware of it. These are good things to check on the title report ahead of time. And then if the seller has an operations manual of that solar system, ask them to provide you one. And if they don't, you can probably help the seller call the solar panel company, ask where the links are for that particular manual, because the other agent will certainly be asking for it. So the solar panel contract and the payoff statement, if somebody's going to make an offer, they may want those ahead of time, and it's okay to provide them ahead of time to the agent because they're going to want to consider this in their offering. So it's not something that we can hide and sneak up on them later. So it's better just to get it out there and let them consider it and let them look at it. If they ask, you can go ahead and give it to them early. I recommend, and everybody does things a little bit different, but it is my recommendation in your counteroffer, because most of the offers that we receive, we're always going to counter. There's always some housekeeping or points that we do need to counter. You may want to state something on your counteroffer back to that agent, buyer's agent and buyer, that all parties are aware that the property has a solar panel system. And then you want to put C attached, whatever the solar company calls the contract, put that in there. Solar equipment purchase contract, loan assumption, whatever they're calling it, title it that, and the date. It might be from 2006. It could be from now, but dated, whatever the date is, and the payoff statement dated. And whatever they call the payoff statement, make sure you're using the same titles. And then in your counteroffer, on the regular counteroffer, under paragraph D, there's two boxes that say other. So you can put a check mark in that other box, put a check mark, one for the solar panel equipment contract, and the other box, check for the solar panel payoff. So this way, everybody's aware and on board that that's there, okay? Now it's going to be on paragraph D in an SCO, but on a multiple counteroffer, it'll be in paragraph E. Same thing, check the other boxes. There will be two other boxes for you. You can put the contract in one, payoff statement in another. So on your SPQ, there's a few places to mark. I only listed one, but you're going to go through your SPQ as a listing agent and help your clients and remind them on number 8B, and I'll pull it up. Mark yes that there are leased items on this property. It's asking you if there's leased or liened items. And in the explanation section, when you mark that, you could again put see attached, whatever that contract's called by the solar company, dated, and payoff statement dated. So now you're attaching it again to a disclosure so everybody knows about this. We want to make sure that everybody's aware and it's well documented that they had the information. So I'm going to go through, I'll show you 3 places on the SPQ in a minute where we can document this. And then on the TDS on page 1, we have a other section. You can also put there solar panel system noted on property, or solar panel system on property, because that would be the seller filling it out. And if you like, you can also attach it there as well. On your AVID agents, when you are performing an AVID and there is a solar system on the property, please under other, put that there's a solar panel system noted on the property. Make sure that you're doing that. That's another trigger that people will say, okay, so what about that? But if you document the way we're as a company asking you, it's going to be out there, out front, well documented, and everybody's going to know that it's there. Okay. And the best thing is they're going to have that contract from the solar panel company right in their hand, right out the gate with your counter offer. Okay. So I'll go into the disclosures in a minute, but I'm going to move on to the steps for the buyer. Okay. Buyer's agent, excuse me. Okay. Make sure when you're representing a buyer, and there's solar panels, again, that you've received that originally signed solar panel contract from the listing agent. And if they didn't provide you the payoff statement, make sure that you have asked for it, because as I said, it can differ from the financed amount. And a big step in this process as a buyer's agent is please make sure that you're communicating with your lender. And you could even find out the monthly payment amount on that solar system before you write your offer. You could even call the lender ahead of time and say, hey, it's $180 a month. Will this work with my client? Because as you know, that's, that is money they have to pay out, and that's going to be considered by the lender. Okay, so make sure that you're communicating with your lender and let them know all that you know. I know that recently we just had a lender ask us for the whole solar panel contract, and we are the buyer's agent. So if you can get that ahead of time, make sure that you're doing that so the lender can tell you if that affects the amount, of the loan that they can let on that house. And also, I think it's a good to check because sometimes the solar panel, it's not taking care of all the needs of the property, all the electricity. So you want to ask if they could provide you with the past 3 months or so of the current Edison or whichever electricity provider, excuse me, is on that property. So make sure that you're asking like really quickly to please provide, the current past 3 months Edison bills or their electricity provider. So you can take a look at that and the buyer can consider that with the solar payment. And another thing too, if you have a pool on that property, if there's a pool, do be asking, is that pool covered by the solar system? Is it hooked up to it? These are things you're going to want to know. So if there's a pool there or a spa or something like that, or if there's a guest house, make sure you're asking. In our case, we have a pool that's covered under the solar panel system, but the guest house is not. So make sure you're asking these kind of questions for your buyer. So even if the seller, let's say the seller said, hey, I'll pay it off, or the buyer said, I'll pay off through escrow, it's most likely from our research, and again, every company is going to be different, but let's say that seller signed a contract for 15 or 20 years. A lot of these are very long range contracts. the buyer is still going to be involved with that solar panel company from our research. And again, you have to research this, or your buyer does, because every company is going to be different. But the two I've engaged with, you're still going to be involved with that solar panel company, even though the equipment is paid off for the duration of the contract. So make sure that when you give your buyer this contract for their review, make sure they understand that. Make sure they're calling the solar company and asking these types of questions. So again, here we're reminding you to ask the seller if they have a manual on the system. If not, ask, have the buyer ask, or you ask the solar company where you can download one for the particular system that's on the property. And in the contract, in our RPA, we have 17 days after acceptance to review any leased or liened items on the property. Please don't let those be counted to too few of days. Days fly by quickly. Sometimes it takes multiple calls to get all of your answers. So please don't, have those countered down so tight that it's stressful for everybody. I think that you should use the whole 17 days. And if the listing agent wants to counter them down, tell them it takes a few phone calls to get all your questions answered. So make sure that you're very cognizant of your days on the leased or liened items. You're going to need them. So I just put together a little list of some questions that the buyer may want to ask the solar company. If you pay off the system, how long do you have to interact with the solar company? So again, is it the whole duration of the contract? Do I still need to fulfill the years left on the contract? And like I said, in Shumay and I's research, on the two we've researched, yes, indeed, you do. So, and then after the payoff, who owns all the equipment? Every company's different. You need to ask them that, okay? So does the system have energy storage capabilities? Some of the smaller ones may not, but some of your larger ones will have the capability to store power. Also, let's see, sometimes when the sellers bought the system, they may have gotten a credit and they got the credit. So you may want to find those things out and see, because maybe you want to try to negotiate some payoff against that system if that is the case. When you pay off the system, if you pay it off well in advance, and even if it's not paid off, make sure that the client is checking on the warranty policy of that system. Who's going to replace things? How often will it be checked to make sure it's working properly? These are very important questions for them to do in their homework on this. And the solar, does the solar company still service the equipment through the contract period, even if the system is completely paid off? Again, we're touching on that again. Just ask if it's paid off, who is servicing it, or does it cost some extra money, or what the warranty and what the service policy is on that. I'm not an engineer, but I do ask how many kilowatts the system produces. And the reason I ask is because at least I have written that down, and the buyer can call back in and recheck all of this, and they may have somebody, an inspector or a friend, that understands that production rate. And also a good question for them to ask is, what's the life expectancy of this system? If I need a new battery, is there a charge to replace it during the contract? So these are questions for the buyer to ask. Once the contract is satisfied, the 15 or 20 years, can the house just run with the local electric company, or will your power usage still be managed in some part by the solar company? What is the time frame to decide if you want to renew that contract at the end of the term? Because sometimes they'll make you notify them in 90 to 100 days in advance, or sometimes, it's less. So make sure that you understand at the end of that contract, how do you notify them if you want to renew, or what happens at the end of that term? Okay, So those are just some ideas, and I'm going to go in to a couple of the disclosures so that we know where to document this, so that everybody's on board and knows about the solar panels. When you put it in your counter, they should know right away, but let's look at the SPQ. Okay. Peter, did you have any comments before I go into the SPQ?
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of comments about the
Okay.
solar panel. A lot of people don't understand that you know, they have two obligations for the owner. One is a contractual obligation in terms of the installation of the solar panels, and that was done between the owner and the solar panel company. And it outlines all the obligations of both parties, and for a term of 15, 20 years. It's a long time. And so you have to really read the contract between that the owner and the solar panel company. It can be you know, it's a lot of things are in the fine prints, and you really have to read it carefully and disclose it to the buyer before you let the buyer you know, decide whether they want to take that system or not. And those contracts are usually for long term, and it cannot be terminated unilaterally. So that has to be taken care of. That is very important. The second thing is the solar panel financing. Okay, that is the when most of the time when the owner does not have enough money to pay off the whole system at one time, and it has to finance it through a lender, and that is different between the contract between the lender and the owner. And sometimes the lender wants to put a lien on the property, and that can you know, last a long time too. So those two things that you really have to you know, find out you know, the details, and make sure that the buyer understand it. Sometimes after the financing, even if you paid it off, the contract between the owner and the solar system still exists, and then it can be a ongoing obligation as well. And also you have to find out you know, what kind of whether the solar panel will provide 100% or you know, a certain percentage of the usage of the property. Sometimes the solar panel only provide for the pool, which is what I had before. And then, you know, if there's a solar panel there, and the buyer thinks that it provides all the electricity for the whole house, when they find out that you'll be really in trouble. So you really have to find out how much electricity that they can provide for the house. And also when you have the credit to the owner, you know, from the get-go, when the contract was formulated, you have to find out you know, what percentage of the credit you have to give it to the buyer. And so the buyer will understand, hey, you know, you have given like $20,000 credit at the beginning, and I'm obligated for 15 years. So I should, you know, I should get some of the credit from the owner. And you know, so you have to take care of that as well. So that's some of my comments, Michelle.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter. Those are very good. I'm going to show you on a counteroffer, and Peter can correct me if he needs to. But for me, and this is long-winded, I just kind of was drafting it last night thinking. So when we're talking about documenting down here and putting the, you know, the documents that pertain to that system, you know, all parties are aware there are solar panels on the property. And the buyer is advised to call the solar panel company regarding assuming the solar panel, use the correct name of the contract because solar panel companies call them different, payoff, warranty, and any questions they may have. And they also need to agree to cooperate with the seller, the solar panel company, and escrow in assuming and transferring that solar panel contract, within their 17 days after acceptance. So this gives them the 17 days again to review, but there's also a transfer document that will need to be genned up or generated by the seller that the buyer is going to need to sign, saying, hey, solar company, I'm assuming. And I believe sometimes they'll check credit. One contract I was reviewing recently, you had to have a minimum FICO score. So make sure that if you're the listing agent, that the other side understands that there's a transfer document that will be generated, of course, after their contingency period, that the buyer's going to need to sign to assume that if that's the agreement, so this is long-winded here, but I just wanted to give you a sample. Make sure you're covering that the buyer's going to need to assign an additional document and that they're willing to cooperate with seller, the solar panel company, and escrow in getting that transfer document signed, okay? Because you can't move forward on this if they don't want to sign it. Then it's, it's not going to work, okay? So seller property questionnaire, I just want to give you some examples. When you're the listing agent, and I wrote down a couple of places where 8B, right here. So on 8B, it says, are you aware of any leased items servicing the property, such as solar system? Of course, yes. Solar panels, solar system noted on property. Okay, solar system is on the property. Okay, so you're going to want to check that. But also, if you come down to, wait a minute. So I'm sorry, I'll go up one. 7B also, are there any altercations, modification, replacements, remodel, or material repairs affecting the property for the purpose of energy? Yes, there are. If there's a solar panel, yes, solar panel system on property. So now we have 7B, 8B, and then there's one more. I'm going to come down to 15B. Okay, so if the reason I think we should have the title report up ahead, if there's any leases that are relating to the title or use of the property, Peter can correct me, this says leases, options, or claims affecting or relating to the title or use of the property. For me, I would check yes and put solar panel lien on preliminary title report dated, whatever it's dated. So now, agents, you've covered it in 3 ways on the SPQ. So I'm going to show you a couple of other ways that will really nail this down and you will be covered, okay? So I'm going to, because it's such an important topic, that's why we're spending time on it, okay? So I'm going to come down here to the TDS. Come up here. So on one document, I'm going to put see attached AVID here for myself. I'm the buyer's agent. On my AVID in the other section, I'm going to put solar panel system noted on property. Okay, so I'm going to attach my AVID as we recommend to this TDS. Okay, now here, let me come up. You have a section on page 1 that's other. So as the listing agent, you could ask the client if they want to check that box, and they can put solar system on property. So if you want to add that there, you can also do that, okay? So there's another way. And there's one other way that I really like. I'm going to show you one more thing. If I have really important, I mean important disclosures, they're all important, but some you want to make sure that they're acknowledging they received, I'm going to throw a receipt for reports. Number 1, this will all be filled out. Right down here, I'm going to click. I am going to type what the report is, And I'm not delivering it via link in this case. I'm going to type the report, who it was prepared by, and the date. So to protect further, I'm going to make sure that I have sent this out. Okay. So this is another check. Now, what does this do? This has the buyer acknowledge it. Okay. So if you have those solar panel contracts, you can also use, and I do recommend it, this form to transmit them to them in addition to your other disclosures. Okay. So this is really nice on number 2, reports not verified by broker or seller, that we're representing. We haven't verified everything. Okay. So the buyer to do their own investigation. So for me, and what I will start using consistently if I have reports like that to deliver is this receipt. Okay. So there we go. So if there's any questions, go ahead, or if Peter has any further comments, then we'll move on to the next topic. Anybody? Peter?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Michelle, can I ask one question just to
Yeah.
clarify for the agents? Is the seller required to pay off the equipment portion of the solar panels?
No.
So it can be transferred to the buyer?
No.
Okay,
No, that transfer document it's a transfer / assumption.
got it.
So even if they had it paid off, they still need to cooperate to sign the transfer document. Yeah.
Okay.
So no,
Yeah,
it's not required.
Yeah, that's two different things, Ruben. One is for financing, which is for the payoff of the solar panel expenses. The other one is the contract between the solar panel and the owner, and it's a long-lasting contract that can last for 15 years. That deals with the maintenance and deals with the operation obligation of the owner and the obligation of the solar panel company. So
Okay.
yeah,
Just wanted to
and
clarify.
most of the contract between the owner and the solar panel is assumable. You know, and not all of them, but most of them are assumable. But you have to find out from the contract.
Correct. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you both.
Sure.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to another very important topic, and I'm sure Peter will have some additional information and instruction for you. So I'm going to go over my notes. So it's really important as agents, if we notice a square footage difference from what the assessor's office, and we can go into our real list on our MLS and pull that information up. If you notice a difference on the assessor's office data to the actual square footage or difference in rooms, bedrooms or bath counts or anything like that, make sure you're inquiring about it right up front. So listing agent, if you notice there's a square footage difference or bed and bath count difference, ask the seller, do you know what's causing this difference? Was there any additions done? Did they have permits? Things like that. These are really important because they're going to be flushed out anyway. So it's better to jump on it in the beginning and try to find these things out because the buyer's agent will be asking you. So if there's a guest house, pool house, or ADU on that property, there should be a structure for that. I mean, there should be a permit for that structure, listing agent. So make sure that you understand if it's a permitted structure. These again are questions that a good agent is going to be asking you. When there is a difference in the square footage to the assessor's data and you're posting on the MLS and you're putting the square footage or bed and bath count on the MLS as to what it currently is, not what the assessor's data is, the square footage becomes estimated, and the bed and bath count you're going to manipulate on the system. But you need to put a comment in the agent remarks on the MLS. It's a private comment. As an example, assessor's data shows a 3-bedroom, 1-bath at 1,500 square feet. However, there are 3 bedrooms, 2 bath at, 1,400 square feet. Buyer to verify. Okay, so make sure in the agent remarks, so you're cluing the other agent in. Again, we can't hide this. You can't sweep it under the rug. Get it out there. Let's work on this. There may be somebody that doesn't mind it and they're happy with it. but make sure you're letting them know. If you are aware of any square footage or room count differences, additional structures on the property, make sure, listing agent, that you're disclosing this on your disclosures. If you know there's different square footage or room count that you've discovered, you can put it on your AVID if it's not addressed by the seller in their TDS or SPQ. Make sure that that's being addressed by you, okay? So as a buyer's agent, which is what I've recently gone through with Shumay and I researching some things. If you notice a difference from the square footage, first ask the listing agent if they know why or what's, what causes that. So if you can't get the answer, because let's face it, they may not know. So if you want to verify the difference in the square footage, you can take the buyer or advise the buyer to go to the city or the county. There's properties that reside right around us, even in San Gabriel, that's in unincorporated areas. So that becomes a county check, not a city check. And ask for the permits. If you go to the city or if the property is unincorporated and ask for permits, you go to the counter, get in line. I recommend you get there, early if you can. And it should be free. I so far have not had to pay for any permits that they've handed us. It should be a free service, but if not, it's still worth the buyer paying a little money to grab whatever permits reside in those offices. So again, we're reminding you, if there's a guest house, pool house, ADU, there should be a permit. Super important step for the buyer to verify. If you're at the city or county and they didn't hand you that permit, ask them, is there a permit for that guest house, pool house, or ADU? Remember, ADUs are a newer phenomenon. Guest house, pool house, probably, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But anyway, ADUs are newer. So if it's an older structure, it's probably a guest house or pool house. But at any rate, advise the buyer to verify and try to see if there's a permit at the city or county office, if that's applicable. Now, if your buyer feels intimidated or they're not comfortable or they just don't want to go to the city or county counter to ask for those permits, you can let us know. We do know of a service that you can pay to get the permits from the city, or if it's unincorporated, county counter, and they will pull those permits for you. It usually is a $50 to $75 fee, and they will pull the permits and email you a stack of whatever they were able to locate at those counters. Okay, and remember that not all permits, it's not guaranteed that all permits are going to be located in the city or the county for unincorporated properties. Now, if you needed to go a step further, which in one case we were advised to go to the assessor's office, but we are the buyer's agent, to seek permits from the assessor's office requires a wet signature authorization form authorizing who's ever showing up at that counter to ask for information on the property. So, maybe in that case, the seller may not want to give the buyer's agent that authority, but maybe they'll go with their own agent. So there's different assessor's office locations, and you can call the headquarters for the assessor's office to ask which location would service your property in question. And there's a phone number. Make sure, agents, when you receive the seller's disclosures, that if they've noted anything about square footage or differences, make sure you're really tapped in and tuned into that, and you're leading your buyer in the right direction to find the information. This is critical. It's important. When an appraiser comes out on that property, they are going to be measuring that property. And when they find a difference, and we have had this happen within the last year, that square footage is not going to count in your appraisal if it's, if they find a difference and they don't find a permit. So very critical that you do this work ahead of time. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not that hard. You can just be over at the offices, with your buyer at 9 in the morning, and you'll get through it fairly quick. So I have another form. This just shows the assessors. There's multiple locations. So you do need to call. Here's the headquarter and find out where your property, which assessor's office you would go to check documentation on that property if you need to take the next step on it. So I am going to let Peter give his comments on this.
Okay, as far as getting the footage, square footage is concerned, there are 3 places that you can get it. One is the preliminary title report. They usually give you the footage of the property, and also you can get it from the assessor's office. As Michelle said, it's very easy. Just sometimes you can just call them up and find out some information, and they are very, very courteous and very helpful. If you want, you can also go down there personally, and you don't have to wait too long for that. I went there to the downtown a few times, and it's not bad at all. You don't really have to wait too long. And the 3rd place that you can get it is the city's record, and you just go to the building and safety department and find out what exactly the footage of that property is. Now, but most importantly, I think is you should have a disclaimer in your somewhere in your offer or counter offer saying that the price of the property is not directly proportional to the square footage. That put the the buyer on notice that, hey, you shouldn't take the footage square footage too seriously, because sometimes it's not uniform. Sometimes the measurement is you have some discrepancy of measurements. So you should give the buyer the disclaimer that the price is not proportional to the footage that is stated on the property profile. I think that's a good protection for you.
Yes.
Okay.
If you have permits, agents that you're going to disperse to the other agent, again, this receipt for reports would be really great to send that over so that they have to sign that they, received it. So listing agent, if you're going to give permits, if the seller gave them to you and wants them sent over, make sure you're documenting that on the receipt for reports, so that the buyer has to sign that they received those. So we'll open it up for any questions. We have Peter here. It's a great time to ask him. If anything on this that you want to ask, please unmute yourself, put it in the chat box. Let us know how we can help you or answer your questions. Anybody? Okay. Well, we must have did a good job explaining. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Hi, Irma.
Hi, Emma.
Hi. I'm only because I know a lot about solar,
Okay.
especially if you're going to be a listing agent, because several years ago, one of my friends had solar installed, and they was over here in Orange County. And one of the things I told them to do, and I said, provide your bills so they could see the advantage of how much they're going to save. So a lot of people don't ask for that, but how is your solar performing? If you're the listing agent and they're doing a fantastic, it's covering at least 80% of their usage, that's a great selling point. Just letting you know that.
That's a great point, Irma. Thank you for that. And you can get that usage report as the seller from the solar panel company. That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point, Emma.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Well, Michelle, this is Clint. How you doing? Good morning.
Hi, Clint.
I have a question. The questions that you have listed is, I think, is really helpful. If we encounter a listing, that the question we should ask the seller who has the panel. The questions, where can I get a copy of it? Because the question you just mentioned is kind of very important, because the buyer would want to know, for example, the contract is going to be long, 15, 20 years. Who's going to maintain the product?
Oh, yeah,
What is
yeah.
the cost and everything else? So if we get a list of questions that we should have asked, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, we have a sample list that we prepared, and it does ask about the maintenance and the warranty, very important.
Right.
Yes, yes, good point.
Because I have clients asking me if I take over the contract, what is my cost of maintaining the system? And
Yeah.
what's involved, what's not involved, what else I have to pay? And there's a lot of questions we need to answer to the buyers.
And I think it's important for you to tell the buyer to read the contract themselves to
Yeah.
have them satisfied that's actually in the contract.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
And also, one of the other things is if, you know, as an agent, if you're just the one on the phone with the solar company, it might be a good idea for the buyer to be on the phone with them or listening or three-waying or something, because they may have questions that you're not asking, and you want them to hear right from the solar panel company, not from you. So it's
Absolutely.
important that they listen, okay?
That's a good
And
idea.
read, like Peter said, it's so
Thank you.
important.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ruben?
No, I think you guys covered it pretty well. And I appreciate, and I'm sure all the agents appreciate it. So in the future, if you do come across either ADU or solar panel issues and need a refresher, Michelle, Peter, and myself are here. So, and this is also going to be recorded and put on YouTube. So you could always revert back to YouTube and brush up on it when this instance does come about and stuff. So Michelle, I really appreciate Peter. You guys did a really good job.
Oh, thank you. And I
Thank you,
wanted,
Ruben.
yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Michelle.
And it's such an honor to be with you all and learn together. So I thank you for your time. It's an honor. Thank you.
One last thing to all our agents, happy Friday. Real estate is still going on every day. There's contracts being signed every day, sellers and buyers. So you just need to get out there and be in front of it. So don't lose those contracts to the competitors. Call your prospects and see what you can do for them, okay?